We'll resume with what number stands for?
How many take over?
H8.
H8.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Stan Bale was here in the BLM.
Getting me right up, thank you. I want to put some visuals up and then use the overhead too. So let's,
Yeah.
what makes you think you can see from here?
You're on it today, aren't you?
He's always like that.
And then we put one below.
Throwing barbs or
Yeah, but all friendly people, so that's
Yeah,
the
okay.
problem.
Yeah.
Then we'll stick this in the boundary. Let's get away from that. All right. Hey, Richard, did you hear the Ninth Circuit Court doing a favor of BLM?
Oh, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
There's good in allow 45 horses.
Masking.
45 will be fine. You're gonna keep that one. 3 or 4 or 5 or 6.
Didn't introduce it.
I wouldn't even fire.
I have no idea.
Good afternoon.
I just want to say that, thanks Stan for coming. Just a little introduction. This is, Stan showed the coordination council, which Bob and I sit on this proposed possible project at our last coordination council meeting. So we suggested that he come and share with the board and the local media because you've scheduled a public gathering on
Public
this
scoping
on the
meeting, right.
27th of May.
27th of May, which is the Tuesday after Memorial Day.
Yeah, at the Standish Grange at
6:30?
6:30, yeah. So we wanted to give an opportunity to get the word out, so some potential horseback trails and things. So anyhow, with that, yeah.
All right. Well, a little background. I'm Stan Bales, outdoor recreation planner with the Bureau of Land Management. Been involved with trails for many years around here, and both motorized and non-motorized. People think of me on the Biz Johnson lot, but I actually was real involved with, where's Bob Burns?
He's not here.
Oh, he just dogged me out in the hall. I actually was the guy who wrote the grant that got the funds that built the Ford Sage off-road vehicle area also. So I've managed trails in various capacities. Other people are doing a great job at Fort Sage. So in our 20-year look ahead in the land use planning that we did for BLM that was completed in 2008, one of the things we looked at was trails. You know, where would we want additional trails around here? And so in that land use plan that went through a whole bunch of public involvement, there are proposed trails on Bald Mountain. And the big photo on the left is Bald Mountain. Most of you know where it is, but I put the photo up. Basically out there between Standish and Janesville. And grassy hill that's burned a few times. Used to be pretty important for deer winter range. Still is considered important deer winter range, but not a lot of good brush is left out there. And OHV's quads riding out there actually started one fire in '90. So we did fence it to try and help the recovery of the deer habitat, and it doesn't have a whole lot of OHV use on it now. But apparently we also fenced out the equestrians because they used to ride in there more than they do now. So part of our vision would be to provide trails on Bald Mountain for non-motorized users with an emphasis on equestrian use. Many of the equestrian riders live in that part of the valley, or at least Honeyland Valley, and even though, as Bob pointed out earlier at another meeting, there's thousands of acres of public land that you can go ride on, just cross-country. However, it seems that many people choose not to do that, but instead trailer into Susanville and ride on trails that have been built at Susanville Ranch Park on county property, or on the Biz Johnson Trail, or now we have the Southside Trail. So the idea would be to actually develop some trails, generally 18 to 36 inches wide, maybe 48 at most, and then they would grow back in depending on the type of equipment that is used to build a trail, whether it's a hand crew or a small trail tractor. Looking at the maps, it appears to me that you could build somewhere between 10 and 20 miles of trail out there with loops, so that people could go out and do a loop that would be a few miles. And many people are time limited, so that's another factor. It's not much point in building a big 20-mile loop that nobody has time to go do. Rather have a number of small loops that all interconnect that people might be able to fit in the evening, after work, or on the weekend and go out and try and ride a bunch. The views from Bald Mountain are terrific. If you look at the photos on the right, the top one, it's kind of hard to make out, but that view is way down towards Doyle, State Line Peak way down there in the distance, 40, 50-mile views. And the other way is looking at Thompson Peak on the left along the Diamond Mountain Ridge. And you can even get a glimpse of Mount Lassen. So, and then of course to the north you see Antelope and Schaefer and Skedaddle. So depending on the time of year, you get snow coatings on some of the mountains around the valley, but this is low enough where it doesn't get a lot of snow. In a big year it would. So I'm here today, basically I'll put out a couple overheads just to give you a feel for the ownership and really to just let you know that we want to move ahead in planning this, but we aren't settled on exact alignments. We have some ideas, and I've been hiking around out there trying to get an idea of where trails may be suitable. And I'll just, I know it's pretty hard. Can you see that come up on the board? I imagine you're going to see much. Oh, thank you, Jim. Yeah, that makes my difference. So those are familiar. Here's A3 that cuts around from Janesville over to Standish. And this is the mountain that fades down to the ag land. Byers Pass comes through here, and the fences are evident around the perimeter. The yellow is BLM. This is a map put together by one of our range managers for cattle grazing out there. Because it's dry and the waters don't last a long time, it's basically a 1-month grazing season, April 1 to April 30. And then, of course, the other resource interest and use is deer, winter range. Based on what we've heard from Fish and Game, the deer, it's critical deer winter range when things are critical for the deer. A year like this, where it isn't that critical because there's a lot of places for the deer to go, isn't as critical, but that's things we'll work through. Target shooting is a big factor out here along Byers Pass Road. We feel that it is a place that works well for target shooting. However, there's a lot of mess that comes with some of the targets that people leave. And so perhaps that can be improved in conjunction with any trails out there. Other things to consider for trails, of course, the adjacent landowners, their interests and concerns. The fact that some of the landowners like to target shoot as well into the hill. So we want to be safe, sure any trail layouts are safe. And the popular target shooting area happens to be right in here, in some hills, but there is ridges, so it's likely that trails could be laid out behind the ridges where it would be safe. Trailheads, of course, would be another thing we need to consider, where it would be a suitable place for people to trailer in, park, unload, and take off. And we thought perhaps you could have a trailhead on either end of Byers Pass Road, but that's up really for discussion. There's some physical topography that would work well there, but I'm not sure how it would work with the adjacent landowners. Also, there are some folks who live nearby that perhaps could ride in. If there was access that could be secured, there's quite a bit of private land on the east side and a little bit on the north. If access could be provided through some of these doing owners and through the gates by the fence, then you could actually have ride-in access to some of these trail loops too. Outlook for planning and perhaps getting these on the ground, probably a couple of years if things went through the process as we would hope. But really we're at the stage right now of looking for input from affected users. You folks, of course, with the areas of landowners or other interest groups. The equestrians are very interested in this. We're thinking it would be non-motorized trails for all user groups. So sure, you would get the hikers and runners and perhaps some mountain bikers. Just we want to make it clear from the get-go that the intent would be to try and provide a place where near where people live, so they don't have the trailer going into town as far. It's not big haul town, but it would be more convenient if you had trails right in there.
What do those stars represent?
Let's see, Upland Health Assessment Point, that's basically a BLM term for evaluating range condition.
How many acres is it again?
Let's see, it says 3,000, this map doesn't, yeah, 3,000 acres on BLM for yellow, 148 AUMs, and season use is April 1 to April 30. The Bill brothers ran out there for years, then the Harkness brothers, and I think 5 Dot Todd's Hooker run out there now.
So it'll be open to everybody, so even the people in town can go out and ride
Yeah,
out there.
yeah, I mean, the winter months, when you get more of the snow on the west side, this generally isn't heavily snowed, although we all know it can't get snow, but it tends to melt out. And just the way the topography is, if you staged somewhere down here at the entrance to Byers Pass on the south, trails would be south facing, it would probably melt out and dry out more readily. North facing slopes would just be a little more moist.
How many miles of trail?
Just my looking at a map and trying to plot routes that had reasonable grades in the world, we plan trails where you have this phrase 8 is great, which is like 8%. And 8% is not that steep, but you find that it works quite well, and we dip and roll and drain water off, so the trails are what we call sustainable. So with that gradient and looking at the topography, I figure somewhere between 10 and 20 miles could be laid out there with various what we call stacked loops. So you could get some loops down low, some loops that take you to the high point, some loops perhaps over in here, perhaps over in here. So we basically want to go to the next stage after getting input from you folks, and then go out to the community, have a meeting in Standish at the Grange on the 27th. 6:30, and get input from others, and then sit down and start planning. I will have to go through, to get anything on the ground, I have to get all the ologists to clear the property, the biologists, the botanists, and the archaeologists have to walk a flag line that we actually specify where we think trails should go. So first we got to figure out where they shouldn't go, from input from others, including safety issues, then start plotting where we think they should go, then we have to have specialist input, and then make changes based on that if we have some avoidance areas, and then finally come up with a draft environmental document that says this is what we'd like to do.
Is there hunting pressure there now?
Yeah, there is hunting, and there's a late season black powder hunt that goes on out there as well. So, yes, as with trails out in national forests, people use the trails during hunting season. You just need to be aware of it, and be smart when you're out there. As it turns out, our big Biz Johnson Marathon, hundreds and hundreds of runners, is out there when hunting season is going on as well.
One other question is, you were talking about how that is burned before in the past. Looking forward, after you get the trails built and you have a fire that burns that, is this gonna be like cattle grazing allotments where you're gonna shut down the trails and not let any equestrian on there? Or is it still gonna be open after fire, you can have a 2-year rest or 1-year rest, or no rest, just keep the trails
Yeah,
open?
that's a very good question. I guess that's something we will address as part of developing a plan. I know down at the Fort Sage area where thousands of acres burned in the fish fire, we did do an emergency closure down there for a while for the off-road vehicle trails, just to try and get some recovery going. If people stay on the trails, it really doesn't hurt the recovery. The real point on those closures often, especially for grazing, is so you get that regrowth going without the animals pulling the shoots out. And here we don't have the wild horse issues. Elsewhere where you have rehab on fires, often the wild horses sometimes have as big an impact or more than the cattle grazing, because you can manage the cattle just on a seasonally used permit, whereas wild horses it's a little more challenging.
So the trails have to be non-motorized, would include all recreation type use, but this would be kind of promoted more for equestrian use, or is it going to be exclusive for equestrian?
Not exclusive, Jim. I mean, I think realistically, we're not in a situation to say it's only one use.
Yeah.
So we would say it's for non-motorized users with a clear emphasis that, hey, we're trying to develop this so that folks who ride horses have a place near where they live. but certainly, in walking, driving around the perimeter this winter and hiking, you know, I saw runners out there in stands, you know, just out there running, so you know you're gonna have runners. We saw a lady walking her dogs, and she loves walking up there now.
We've got a number of parks developed all around, and of course, we have the motorized OHV area out there, Turtle Mountain, and I mean, we try to, even though other types of uses can take place, you know, every area kind of has kind of a specialty, and that's one thing we haven't really had a clearly defined it, promoted as a primary equestrian type facility. I mean, others can use it, but I think it would be really helpful to have something that is, you know, clearly defined for that group of recreationists, because I think they should be given the same consideration the others. So I know when we deal with our comprehensive economic development strategy, Richard, you know, in terms of the SIDS thing, when we talk about promoting the recreation tourism in terms of bringing people here that can enjoy that. I mean, I think having something like this here, you know, would hopefully be something that, I mean, obviously the locals in the immediate area would be convenient and they should thoroughly enjoy it, but it'd be nice if we can use it to promote and tie into it as you do your scoping and your analysis, is take notice of the county's adopted SIDS report as being another way of promoting recreation tourism, and maybe having equestrians that come from a 200-mile radius of Lassen County or this area that would be inclined to want to make a day trip or come up for the weekend and ride some different trails. Because when you ride the same trail over and over and over again, after a while, it does get monotonous. So you do look for opportunities to go other places, and I think that would be something that would be, you know, it promotes our agricultural way of life.
For instance, I met a couple down at the railroad depot last week who were riding the biz, and they were up from Carson City. And he'd ridden it before, she hadn't, so he was bringing her up, and he was very complimentary in the biz. But that's a case where you might be able to get them to stay another day, spend the night with the horses over the fairground or somewhere, and then ride some other trails.
One last, just more of a statement, is you look at your pictures here, it's very interesting. You have from January 14th, January 22nd, February 21st, and February 26th. Those are the winter months.
Yeah.
Only white you see is the cloud in the sky.
Yeah.
Kind of scary.
Yeah, well, we
Archive those pictures.
well, we basically took advantage of the weather and said, well, let's get going and let's get out there before, you know, while we can. And so Joel Rathje, your Lassen County Trails Coordinator, went with me, and it's a good safety system when you have two of us hiking around out there. And we're just trying to get a feel for what's on the ground to begin with. And, but you're right, you know, it could be snowy in a season when you wouldn't really want to be out there. We've seen the valley coated with snow and cold, but
Just a reminder how dry our year is.
yeah, not much precip. But again, the views are great. The foreground isn't really a knock your socks off scenery, but the vistas are terrific. I mean, big 360 views all over up there.
Well, thank you, Stan.
All right, thank you, Larry.
Mr. Chairman, we as a board need to take a position of encouraging or supporting this direction of staff. And I think we should support BLM in all their efforts to proceed with this. I think it's a great opportunity.
Right, yeah, I would echo that.
This is going to work here.
Yeah, we assisted Stan in setting up the 27th, and
This is just a straight photos and a little descriptive justification of the thought process. I'm sure everybody is doing our own planning.
so I think the poll for the board is that we supported this, just let us know what we could do.
Anything we can use.
Make sure everybody- sorry, our printer had some yellows probably.
Do you have an extra one?
Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, I think another thing that we should also take note of, and I think the minutes should reflect, you know, a lot of times we hear concerns, and there are a lot of concerns around the country where public agencies have not been too keen about allowing the public to utilize public lands, and how we need to make the public land open and accessible to the general public to enjoy and use for our economic benefit and stuff. And I think it's really cool that BLM in this case here is coming to us and wanting to come up with a way to open up and enhance the use of the public land we have in our midst here. And that's the kind of thing we should be embracing and supporting, and through coordination through all the different avenues that we have to connection and the ways to have these partnerships. We should not let that opportunity pass.
Stan?
The Forest Service is working with us right now to work on the Fredonia Trail system. I mean, they're doing the environmental assessments and stuff this year. So hopefully by the first part of next year, we're going to be seeing, that agency helping promote, and that just provides more trails for bikes and runners and horses and you name it. So good things are ahead if we work together like this.
Thank you, Stan. Thanks, John.
And Larry, thank you for fitting me in. First thing.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. All right, let's take up item H4.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, board members. I'm here today to ask you to endorse my plan to assign responsibility for Child and Family Services to Eric Lassen, the Director of Community Social Services Department. I don't know if you guys all have met Eric before. Eric, come on up.
We know him.
You know him?
You brought him in a few times.
Okay, as long as you know who he is. He's doing a great job. This action would return Child and Family Services to its traditional and appropriate place in the Social Services Department. We're the only small county that actually has a standalone child welfare services unit with its own director. And that hasn't been a bad thing over the last 10 years, but over the last 10 years they've had 5 different directors with varying degrees of success. And I just think there's a lot of stability to be had in a much larger organization. And I know the former director, Maria Carlamagno, recommended that this unit remain a standalone unit under my direction with its own director. And this opinion was based on her 2 years as the director, half-time director of that department. But I have to point out that through no fault of her own, Maria wasn't there most of that time. She had other things going on and couldn't be at work for a lot of the time, even that half-time. But during her tenure as director, she did a great job with that staff. She cleaned up some messes, she established direction for them, she weeded out the poor performers, and she built a very strong team, and they've done very well while she was absent. Understanding the limitations of her capacity as half-time director, Maria hired a program manager to reinforce her leadership on site when she couldn't be there. Unfortunately, that individual didn't work out. Again, that was not her fault. But that team still hung together, and they've been doing a great job. Which is not to say they don't need a program manager or a director, but I don't think a director of their own is necessary. I think with a good, strong program manager in there, and Eric as a director to handle the administrative pieces of it, we probably work fine. And it would save a significant amount of money to the social services admin budget, the $60,000 in the 14-15 fiscal year. What they need, as I said, is an on-site full-time program manager, and in the last few weeks, Eric and I and the retired program manager from social services interviewed 9 candidates, and out of those we have 2 very strong candidates. And both of them have child welfare background, both of them would just be great at this job, and both of them are immediately available to step into it. So we already have that ready to go. Eric is very familiar with administrative needs of child welfare services. He's been coordinating wraparound KDA for, wraparound KDA involved both behavioral health and child welfare and probation services. Social services is kind of the middle of those. We provide facilitators and do a few other things, manage the budget for those programs. He's been coordinating them for a while now. And then during Maria's absence, he and I have both been backfilling for any administrative needs that that department had. He's well known by the Northern Academy, the directors over there. He's been to some of their classes, he's been to other workshops that they've had involving child welfare services, so child welfare services is not unknown to him. And certainly it's not unknown to me with 33 years. For a brief time I was a program manager in child welfare here. With a strong and experienced program manager and Eric as a full-time director, I think that they would have the leadership and support they need to continue to thrive and grow. They have done very well in the last few years, under Maria's direction, even with her being gone as much as she was. I understand Maria's recommendation, and I understand why you might want to honor her by approving that, but I just don't think it's necessary for us to have another director in that position. Are there questions? Yes, Tom?
I understand before Maria was there, I don't have the history behind me, but that program was in chaos. Are we returning to the same model that got us into that predicament before?
The model before was it had a director of its own under HSS. And I can tell you that child welfare goes through iterations. It's the nature of the beast. And in 33 years, what I've seen in child welfare is that when it's not functioning well, it's usually either one or two of two things. Either it's poor leadership and or poor performing employees. And when you have both in place, it's a real disaster. And we were kind of going through those experiences at that time. And actually that's how the department got split away from HSS before.
Yeah.
And we made a standalone department. That was 10 years ago.
Melody, when you said return it to the traditional way, when in your letter you highlight quite a history of problems. You said from 1989 you came up till 2011. During that time, when you say return to traditional, how was it there shortly after Maria came? Was it when you say traditional? Was traditional from the 89 through 2011 era, or was it?
Well, traditional means throughout California, generally, child welfare services are a part of the social services department along with adult services and eligibility programs. That's what I meant by traditional.
Oh, I see. That was part of Maria's
Not
recommendation.
directly related
Yeah.
to Lassen County. Jim could probably give you some history.
Yeah, I just think that, we asked Maria to take part in the recommendation and be a part of it as a former director. And, I found it a bit strange that, because I know she forwarded a blueprint for success in what she felt. And, by your own letter here, she did a phenomenal job, basically. In a 24-month period, she helped and was very instrumental in going from, being investigated by the state to getting a top 10 in the state award. So I think this should have been part of the info. So here's copies for all the board members.
Sure, we could have included it. In fact, we did review it and take that into consideration in the formulation of the recommendation.
But I don't think any of the board members got a
Okay,
chance.
I thought everybody got a copy of that one. Didn't she email it to everyone?
I don't recall seeing it.
So anyhow,
Okay.
If I could, while you're passing that out, to address, I think, because of my longevity, I've actually lived through most of the turmoil that has surrounded this program. And what I don't want to see us lose with what Maria brought was breaking the cycle that was there in terms of attitudes towards how we interact with the employee and the functioning or dysfunctioning of the employees performing this critical role. Now, from '89, there's been a long-standing culture there. I do support and appreciate going back to the more traditional, where it's placed in the bureaucracy and how it's supervised by the bureaucracy. But what we have to break, and this is, we went through a kind of wringing of the hands in '94. So from '89 to '94, there was an era there, and it led to basically a collapse of the functioning of the program. And that's when Cheryl Rutherford Kelly came in and kind of restructured stuff, and that was fine for until like 97 or 98, and then we had another kind of a big old conflict, and then that lasted again until about 2003, which is really, it was the 2003 era that we saw the board become more involved. I mean, Mr. Kiefer and myself was lead and Bob. I mean, the board said, you know, enough is enough. I mean, this program has got to function. It can't have these system failures that we've experienced. And